as long as we know the goal, that there is, that it's within our mandate, and this is our mandate to be a Beinoni. Number one. Number two, we know that it's attainable for us to be a Beinoni, because you're not talking about very lofty levels which don't seem to be in our regard, in our control, but quite on the contrary, the whole idea of the Beinoni, the way the Alter Rebbe explains it, and this is one of the fundamentals of the Alter Rebbe, yes, because you're not dealing with the actual temptation. The temptation is natural as a human being. That's the way Hashem created us. We have an animal soul and it's fully intact. The idea of it is how much we're going to allow, or if we're going to allow, the animal soul to express itself. Again, from the heart to the thought, speech, and action. We're going to allow that signal, which is inevitably coming from the heart, enter our thoughts, enter our speech, or enter our action. Once we realize that it's not about the temptation, it's about allowing that signal to go further, to trespass into our thought, speech, and action, that tells us how much it's truly attainable. It's within our hands 100% to be the Beinoni. Because to tell somebody you felt that, or you had a temptation to that, you're no good, that's not true. That's again one of the great principles and fundamentals of the Alter Rebbe. You had a temptation to that because you have an animal soul and it's fully intact, as long as you're not the tzaddik. And you're human, and that's what the humanness within a person is an animal soul. So when you tell somebody you had a temptation to that, you're no good, that's not true. That's normal, and that's what we're all about. Even as Beinoni, the Beinoni didn't make a dent in his animal soul. You allow that signal, the animalistic part of you, not only to have a temptation, but to trespass, to cross into thought. I had full control of that. I could have stopped it before it actually entered, willingly to think about, in other words, willingly to think about something. I have full control that I should not think about that. And similarly when it comes to speech, I could have a temptation to speak Lashon Hara, but I not necessarily, or rather I have full control that temptation should be halted at a certain point and not enter my speech. And so in action. So the beauty of the Alter Rebbe is saying, yes, we can be a Beinoni all the time, 24 hours a day. But there is so that idea of knowing that, and as well we know
control and not doing whatever.
Right. So that's why I responded. That's why I responded in this way. That if we'll be a little Beinoni bits, if we're just a little bit of Beinoni, that itself says that itself says that I'm between every time it's a Rasha. No, I'm in between one Beinoni step and another Beinoni step. I'm a Rasha, which means part of the time I gave in and part of the time I didn't give in. The times I gave in means say I deliberately accepted that signal from the heart to enter into my mind to think or speak or do something which is contrary to Ratzon Hashem. That's why I respond in that way. The reason why I'm coming back and saying that, just even something that took a few seconds, but I felt it's important to say that there is an expression of Rebbe in the beginning of the 14th chapter, which we know the precision. Just mention this again. We mentioned this a few times. The precision of the choice of words of the Alter Rebbe is amazing. The more we learn Tanya, the more we realize of the Alter Rebbe himself testified that he made decisions on not only full words, but he made decisions on even the smallest expressions or letters, literally letters. If you choose this letter or that letter, even letters which combine one word to another. So the Alter Rebbe's one word in the beginning of the 14th chapter, he says, which means that it's not to say that today I'm going to a Rasha, tomorrow I'm a Beinoni. It could be that we have to exercise this like anything else. And that's why I want to say that the idea of Beinoni moments, it's not only Beinoni moments to remain with that status quo of Beinoni moments, that's no good.
No,
right? To know that, yes, Beinoni moments, and I'm going to stretch those moments more and more, and I'm going to be a Beinoni because to be a Beinoni is attainable to me. That's the expression of Rebbe. We ought to draw ourselves to that, and I was thinking as well, looking at that very example of fasting. The ultimate objective is to fast the whole day. But take a child and say, you're fasting from eating a whole day to fasting a whole day, doesn't work. There's a training process. And the child, even halachically, he has to fast till this hour, to that hour, and then he becomes 11 or 12, he could fast, stretch it to the whole day, and then he becomes a god and he stretches it the entire day. That's his mandate of fasting. That's his mitzvah, fasting Yom Kippur. So I just want to say that it's true that you think about it conceptually, There is no Beinoni moments, because if you say Beinoni moments, it means to say that there's a rush in between. That's not a Beinoni. But practically speaking, the Alter Rebbe himself uses the lashon eleh kol damimshich. We have to draw ourselves. We have to exercise this because it's attainable to us. So we make sure those Beinoni moments stretch from one point to the other, and eventually the points connect, and then we could really have the 24 hours of complete control of our thought, speech, and action. On the negative side, in other words, not to chas v'shalom transgress, and on the positive side, to do what Hashem wants willingly, and not only with, but not to be laid back. In other words, works to the positive side also. Hashem says, learn, and I could sleep or be lazy and not learn. Right? That's the behemoth within me, the nefesh bahamis within me. And I make the choice, and I know, no, I can, and it's a good environment to learn. I will learn, and I won't be laid back. So it works on the mitzvah say as well, in the thought, speech, and action. I will daven, verbally utter the words as I'm supposed to, etc. So attainable it is. Conceptually, Beinoni means really around the clock, but as we grow, like everything else in Avodas Hashem, the lashon is yimshech, that we take step by step. So Beinoni moments, and we stretch those moments. So I felt I would just mention that. Yes, go ahead.
So when you have that feeling to do something in your action, thoughts, and speech, and you control that moment when you have that idea that you want to do something, is that a Russia moment?
Nope.
It isn't, because that's human.
That's the human part of you, exactly.
We're human. And if we don't act on it, then we are a Beinoni. Or is it just, right?
If you don't act on it, then you're a Beinoni, right?
Then you're a Beinoni.
Right, and before that, you're also a Beinoni. In other words, even before that, this is the Beinoni, that he has an animal soul which is constantly telling him. It's not once a day or twice a day. Right. It could be, we mentioned the other, it could be hundreds of times a day as we know it. That the heart tells us to do. I say hundreds is more when I think about thought, because to maintain the main challenge, to maintain a pure thought all the time, you get hundreds of times. The person has to, make a decision. No, I'm not going to accept. It doesn't mean really hundreds. It could be sometimes a day could be 10, another day could be hundreds. It depends where the person is in his environment. There's thousands of different scenarios where it could change the times, and a person has more struggles with Avodas Hashem where he is, if he's in Beis Medrash, he's in the street and whatever. There's the circumstances. No circumstances are alike. So the fact that, again, the temptation doesn't make him a rasha at all. That's the normal part within him as a human being, and we want to translate human being in the expressions of Tanya. It's the nefesh bahamis. It's the nefesh bahamis. Yet, when it comes to the question is if we're going to allow the nefesh bahamis within ourselves, which is waiting and sending signals to our thought, speech, and action to transgress, to do neged ratzon Hashem, are we going to allow it to trespass that thought, to come into our thoughts or come into our action and cover into our speech? And that we know we have full control. We know we have full control. We do have full control, 100%. And the chidush is obviously when you're dealing with action, with speech, with thought. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. The thoughts, mishatetes tamid, do we have full control? Yes, we do, and we know it, that we have full control, despite the heart is sending always signals within you. Anyway, so that's when we'll come to Bez Hashem, the Dalid, Yudalid, we'll see that expression. But in the meantime, we're in the middle of Gimel. We're in the middle of Gimel. And if you use that, you have that Tanya there over here.
Okay, one second. How many sheets are there?
So there's 4.
4. Oh, you got 4.
Oh, so you don't here. You have it? Okay.
It's a great speaker, right?
Okay. Oh, you don't have it.
And we are in Yud Gimel, right?
We're in the middle of Yud Gimel.
Okay.
And we're going to start where we're holding. Even though there's a nice, beautiful part, which again, everybody's invited always to check it up online if you're interested in going through or you can see the text yourself with your Tanyas, or you could always or see the English in your Tanya anyway, because we did the text till v'af. Just a second. V'af misha b'toras Hashem. V'af misha b'toras Hashem, and that's where it begins. And no, it's the beginning. The first page I gave you. V'af shi b'toras Hashem.
No, I find this right here, but I'm talking in the Tanya. Which paragraph?
Oh, in Yud Gimel, Yud Gimel has 3 full pages.
Right.
Okay, so it's on the second page on top, the fourth line, V'af misha b'toras Hashem. V'af misha b'toras Hashem. And it's the first page that I gave you in the English. So here we're dealing with an interesting. Alter Rebbe explains again based on this understanding of what the BAYT is. Alter Rebbe explains the Gemara, which says in the end of the day that Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov are two judges which clearly say their statement, say their message. The Nefesh Bahamis, again, we're not dealing with a tzaddik, which an animal soul is shrinking and ultimately could be completely gone and transformed, so he doesn't say his opinion, because in the end of the day, especially by tzaddik gomer, he's gone. We're dealing with a BAYT, they both say their statement very clearly. The question is, which one are we accepting? And Alter Rebbe introduces the Gemara that we always need Hashem's help, but it's all based on our decision, where Hashem kicks in and allows us to overcome the Nefesh Bahamis, when many times it brings the pasuk that the man could stand in a state of destitution. To that extent, Evyon, Hashem, when Hashem sees he makes the right decision, Hashem himself gives him the energy to overcome the Nefesh. But then, namely, the Rebbe concludes that the Nefesh Bahamis is intact, and even adds this, which we mentioned last week as well. The more we live in Olam Hazeh, in this physical world, it's even strengthened. The animal soul is even strengthened. It becomes even more determined to express itself animalistically. Why is it more? Because living in Olam Hazeh, the more we engage in worldly affairs, that by nature feeds into our animal soul. So not only is it minimized, as we live every day, Larichas Yamim V'Shalim Tevis in Olam Hazeh, it strengthens. You eat a good breakfast. Who had namely the hana, the pleasure? Obviously, there's a general kavanah, intention. What we do, how we elevate the food, and the nefesh lekis will gain because it could understand a piece of Gemara after, or a Tanya after, or it could daven with more concentration. Sure, there's a big picture, but on the surface, or initially at least, who has the great gain? The animal soul appreciates it more. Like an animal, the more whatever contributes to its comfort, that's what satisfies it. That animal within ourselves, we know it's a good breakfast, and it tastes good, and it makes us feel good. That feeds into the Nefesh Bahamis. So what Alter Rebbe is basically saying, not by the BAYT, not only he didn't get rid of Nefesh Bahamis, the Nefesh Bahamis became stronger. That's mamish the len, and here we're holding it. Even somebody who is a complete learner, he's invested in Torah day and night. And not only is invested in Torah day and night by force, but by force meaning that he forces himself because he knows that Torah is the word of Hashem, he's not going to budge from Torah, but cheftzei means that he has a desire, he has a strong desire to learn Torah. The yege bo yom v'layla. He has a desire to learn. He learns Torah day and night, and not only learns Torah day and night, but lishma. Lishma means for the sake of Torah, not for any other sake. So this seems to be something very special. He sits and learns Torah day and night. He's involved in the word of Hashem day and night, and again, not for any ulterior motives. So lishma, but for the sake of God. So he seems to be really someone's like a tzaddik. But Alter Rebbe says, if you look at it based on the previous explanation, ein zo achacha klal shenitcha haramim kaimei. That's not any proof that the evil within him himself has been budged from its place. That the essence, the core of the animal soul is with its strength and determination. Bimkomo in its original place and state, b'chol asmali, the left side of the heart. The only thing is, how does a person learn? With his thought. How does a person learn? With his speech. How does a person learn? With his intelligence, right? You understand, a piece of Shulchan Aruch, or a piece of Medrash, or a piece of Gemara, or Tanya, any piece of Torah a person learns. How does he perceive the Torah? Not necessarily with his heart. You don't feel the Torah, you understand the Torah. You use your mind, you use your speech, you use your intellect. And even a person is invested in Torah 24 hours, it doesn't mean that he has captured his Nefesh Bahamis on the core level. Not at all. Because what did he do? He got involved in learning Torah. He uses his thought, his garments to understand Torah. His thought to understand Torah, and obviously it's not only the external thought like we think about anything else. We have to put in our intellect, which again, the intellect invests in our thought, and both together create the picture of what we're learning. But in the end of the day, the heart, which is the Nefesh Bahamis, is not being transformed. So the Alter Rebbe just brings it, based on all this, what we said, that someone could learn Torah 24 hours. It doesn't mean, in no form or fashion, that he became a tzaddik. He could, when you say no, didn't become a tzaddik, his nefesh bahamis, his animal soul is in full tact. His thought, speech, and action is completely, of his nefesh bahamis, of his animal soul, are right now not invested, not functioning, because of his utilizing his speech to learn Torah. So his speech, which usually could speak anything else, which can even be animalistic, is right now involved in words of Torah. And the same thing, his thought could speak of any narishkeit or chas v'shalom, maybe things are chas v'shalom prohibited, but his thoughts are involved in understanding Torah. So his machshava of a nefesh bahamis is not in function. And Maisa, he's not doing anything wrong. So where is the change of the person who's invested 24 hours a day in learning Torah in comparison to someone who's not learning Torah? In his core level? Not at all. It could be as a strong nefesh bahamis, which wants to continue being a behemoth. And just like we control the nefesh bahamis in the sur meira, in the negative side, we could compel the nefesh bahamis to learn Torah, but not that then the behemoth changed and it's no more behemoth. Yes.
Okay, so I'm confused now. Can you just clarify very briefly the relationship? I know this is very fundamental, but between the garments and the animal soul, in that it's very hard for me to believe that if the garments are completely focused on Torah learning, that this would have no impact on the heart.
Excellent point you're mentioning.
And also, what I would agree with also is, what about davening moments that you said?
That's right, the high-level thing, Shema Yisrael.
Good, very good. So I'll just say like this. It's two separate points you're saying. Let me address this and I'll get back, not because the order, because really this is a way that should be answered also. Because when you're dealing with, think about it on a very practical, pragmatic level. A piece of Gemara, to understand a piece of Gemara, if you see somebody learning for a piece of Gemara for 1 hour, and he understands it, he's fully engrossed and invested in completely, his cell phone is off, he's completely out of everything and is really invested 100% in understanding this piece of Torah for 1 hour. In your mind, would you consider him a tzaddik? Based on what we understand the tzaddik and Beinani. What? Beinani, yes. Maybe a Beinani. Namely, we're trying to say, is he a tzaddik? Namely, why should he be a tzaddik? He's not a tzaddik. What he did was just like when his nefesh bahamis says, let's look at it in the negative side, and we'll jump to the positive, and then we'll jump to limud Torah. Just like, for example, when a person has a feeling, has a temptation to think something inappropriate, and he interferes, he interrupts rather that signal from the heart that it shouldn't enter the thought, we don't consider him a tzaddik, because we say what you did is your thoughts are pure, but the core of the nefesh bahamis, right? Nefesh bahamis is comprised of the core and then its garments. We mentioned in the very beginning when we were discussing this idea that there's like my man. There's ourselves and our garments, the way we present ourselves, the way we deal with people, with the outside world. Human convention dictates that man is not himself, but with his garments. Same thing, nefesh bahamis. There's a bigger picture. There's a big picture. There's the nefesh, the core of the nefesh bahamis, and its garments. So just like when we say somebody who had a temptation to speak lashon hara, but he didn't speak lashon hara, he kept his speech pure. He had a temptation to think something inappropriate, and he did not think the inappropriate. And similarly, when it came to action, we don't consider him a tzaddik, not at all, not one bit. What he did was he didn't allow the nefesh bahamis to express itself, to go further in its own thought, speech, and action. It stopped at its core level, and own thought, speech, and action did not continue. Then let's look at the positive side. I wanted to take something in my hand, to do something wrong with my hand. In the end, I put on tefillin. That made me a tzaddik? Not at all. My animal soul is still telling me, don't put on tefillin. Put on tefillin an hour later. Use your hand to eat something more and to indulge in a good meal before that. The animal soul could tell us many different, sometimes wild things to do. No, but I stopped and I put on tefillin. So I used my action, and similarly could be with speech, but I'm going to go all through the in order to stop the nefesh bahamis on its core level and not allow the garments for chas v'shalom be impurified with the animalistic temptations or signals of the nefesh bahamis. That's why I'm not a tzaddik. Take it a step further. When you see a person learning Torah, so you see that no question that Torah, to learn Torah you have to invest much more than just like putting on tefillin. Because putting on tefillin, even though it's a mitzvah, one connects himself to the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through putting on tefillin, right? Because a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and a mitzvah is Ratzon Hashem. But in the end of the day, a mitzvah is external, it's a chitzoniistic act, at least on the surface, right? As opposed to someone invests and grosses himself in Limud HaTorah, so then he puts his whole neshama inside, because he has to understand what is the halacha really telling us, and what is the meaning of this, just like the difference if someone is involved in learning any subject, lahavdil, especially when it comes to learning Torah, as opposed to doing something more chitzonius. Then we think, wow, this person is something more on a level, because not only he's submitting his most external dimensions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's submitting more of his deeper dimensions of himself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because it's not a matter of just putting on tefillin, it's a matter of putting my thought and my mind and my intellect and my concentration, and in the end of the day he walks out with a full hour and he knows 2 pages of Gemara as an example. That's wonderful. But if you want to dissect this, in the end of the day, what he did was he captured his thought, speech, and action. And the thought, speech, and action of his nefesh bahamis should not express itself, come to any state of manifestation at all. And quite on the contrary, what his full function here is his nefesh alikis, his thought, speech, and action of his nefesh alikis, because that's the idea of limud HaTorah. But on the core level, where do you see that he uprooted his nefesh bahamis? Could he walk outside after that shir in Gemara and not have the same challenge like he had the same morning before he went into that shir Gemara? It's probably going to happen again. So what he did was, he just put it to sleep a little bit. Now I'm just going to cross over to you. When it comes to davening, this is the bonus of davening, that we're able, because the davening is not only on an intellectual level, that the definition of davening by definition is more of an expression, an emotional expression with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here we're dealing with the problem of emotions. The nefesh bahamis is primarily midot, like a behema. Behema is not intellectual particularly. It knows where to go, but the problem with the behema, it's all. We said the Gemara says a kelev, a dog, is kulalev. It's all about heart. The problem of the animal is about the heart. It's heart. That whatever mitaveh, whatever lust, whatever type it has, that's what it likes to do, and it just looks for one thing, whatever it's going to contribute to its comfort. It's all a heart problem. I mean, in the life of the animal it's not, but in our Avodas Hashem, the nefesh bahamis is a problem because it's about heart, and it sends its signal on a heart level. Davening, even opposed to learning Torah, is the whole davening by definition is a heart expression, and a person could really connect himself on a heart level with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Rabbi told us in the Perikut Beis. I remember if you guys were here in the beginning of Perikut, that this is the bonus of davening. This is the bonus of davening. That the moment, I think we were, that the moment, that the time of davening is a bonus which Hashem gives even the Beinani, that he could connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a heart level. And if you look at these two people, the Tzaddik and the Beinani, there's a certain similarity between them, but precisely in the time of davening. And that's the difference of the Beinani and the Tzaddik. The Beinani, if he truly, again, we're talking about somebody truly exercising real davening. Doesn't mean how much he shuckles, and doesn't mean how much he daven like anything else. Like any art, one has to know how to daven, know how to exercise that particular art. When it comes to the art of davening, the same thing. It's not a matter of, but it's a separate issue. How do we daven? What does it mean exercising good davening? At the end of the day, truly believe a person invests 45 minutes or 50 minutes in davening, and maybe there was 15 seconds, maybe even 10 seconds that he was truly somewhere else in an emotional level with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and a deep, intimate level with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. I think that's a very successful davening, if we can get there, if we're only honest with ourselves. That really, truly, it's not that it's not a matter how much we show. It's something deeper, because by definition, this is what davening is, an emotional connection with Hashem. So that's why the Alter Rebbe told us in Perikut Beis that that's the tzaddik moment the Beinani gains.
It's hitting the heart.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You can still think you're very
great. Not only that, intellect is not a problem really. It's like the guy who could give a very good class how to be a frum yid, and it can be challenged the same way. Of the class which he's giving, telling the people exactly what to do and not to do, he can have the same challenge and maybe even fall through. What happened? Well, that was intellect, because intellect is easier to control, or I'm not controlling. We're not dealing with the control of the thought. Intellect, which means to have something laid down right, Many of us can. We can. Many of us can give good classes and tell people how to live, and know how to read the text well and know how to explain it and so on. When it comes to heart, it's a different story. The challenge is the heart. So when a person learns Torah, what he did was that it's an investment intellectually, and no question that it's a greater investment than, at least on the surface, than doing a mitzvah, because here I'm really investing most deepest parts of myself, my intellect. But does it mean that the heart is completely transformed? I don't know. So just like we can understand it on an hour, now take the same person who 24 hours a day is sitting and learning Torah. It's quantity. He becomes a Heilig Yid for sure, because he connects with Kedushas HaKadosh Baruch Hu every us in Torah he learns. But if you think about to define him to become a tzaddik, not one bit.
So I have a question in the language. You're often using the term Nefesh Bahima. In the Tanya, it talks about like dislodging the Ra, Harav, Malakom Lo. Like, is that are they using those terms?
Could you show me where I'm just trying to see where.
That he didn't, the evil wasn't dislodged.
So when they talk about Hara,
the whole Nefesh Bahamis, you can say Ra.
Okay.
Mim Koime is from the core. Mim Koime is the core.
Nefesh Bahima seems almost like it's a term that could sometimes be a little more neutral. Hara is like really bad.
You know what? It's true also. I'll tell you it's true also, because if you think about it, this is when we spoke about the tzaddik. We say the quintessential tzaddik, not only he shunned the Yitzhahara, or the Nefesh Bahamis, he transformed it, became an ally. What does become an ally? How can you take something which is essentially dirty and make it an ally? I mean, to say it has to be there's some advantage and virtue which exists in Nefesh Bahamis, that if you transform that enemy and ally, it can even contribute to the Nefesh Lakis. So there's something what you're saying is true, because in the end of the day also, when you look at an animal, it's not particularly defined as something bad. Even the idea, even goring by an animal, if you're talking about the context of damaging something else, it's not its nature, even halachically. It's to gore 3 times to become a mu'id. It could go out of line. Like, we can go out of line also. We could allow the Nefesh Bahamis to express itself in a way that it can overly indulge in eating, but once it overly indulges in its animalistic desires and temptations, there's no stop sign between sometimes the permitted and the prohibited, and it goes on, right? So the same thing with the animal. It becomes overly animalistic, and the life of the animal eventually can gore and damage and hurt, but it's not the nature of the animal.
Because the nature means the same thing.
What?
When it says hara, it means the Nefesh Bahamis, right?
He means that, yeah, sure, he's dealing with the Nefesh Bahamis.
Okay.
But he's and you're right that the Nefesh Bahamis is not completely Ra, even though Rebbe defined it before based on where it's sourced. It says there's a little bit Tov. That's what we can transform it. That's what we can work with it. But Ra in this case means to say the core which is the problem of the Nefesh Bahamis, which is the heart, the problem the core which could lead to things which are truly evil, which is an Aveda. True definition of evil is really an Aveda.
Would the Tanya not agree, though, that even though you cannot dislodge it, because dislodge it implies like permanently moving it or exercising it, but would we not say that someone who learns the Shema all day and all night, that at least it would be diminished?
The Nefesh Bahamis. I think this is the message that no.
It's very discouraging. Particularly for those of us who support people learning in Torah.
Yeah.
You'd think that at least it would make a dent.
Yes.
Because the way this is phrased, it sounds like it's not helping you at all.
Well, I don't know if it's...
So let's look at what is...
No, because you're getting so much control. You have all that self-control, so it is helping you. So I presume if you're controlling, it's like having this Benoni moment that will keep growing and growing because you're learning to control yourself.
There's progress from the language here.
Wait, there's 2 things over here. There's 2 things. First of all, the more we learn Torah, the more we fill our 24 hours and stretch the Beinoni time in our life. Now, dealing with the discouraging point which you're saying that it by definition, according to Naveda, what Rebbe explains over here, does not change us as people.
Right.
So first thing I'll tell you, look out there. People 24 hours a day learn Torah, they become edler, refined. Yeah. But the question is the temptations what they have, they lose the temptations. They go out in the street. Let's be very practical speaking, they go out in the street and they're immune to the temptations of the average nefesh bahamis, which it's inclined to tempt the person to do, think, and speak neged ratzon Hashem? Not necessarily. There's no question a person learns Torah becomes abler also. His occupation, his interest is more in Torah. The average Talmud Chacham walks in the street, he's trying to figure out what he learned in the previous Taisus and support Torah all the way, because there's nothing greater than learning Torah, and someone could learn Torah all day, all night. That's the best thing, because but also I must add, and this is what Al Rebbe begins in Perik Lamed Hey. In Perik Lamed Hey, the Al Rebbe writes that, asks this question. If we're not changing, you can look yourself. At the time you have a question, you can look yourself. Perik Lamed Hey. If we're not really changing on a core level, what's it all about? This thing tantalizing, this whole idea.
In Lamed Hey?
In Lamed Hey, beginning of Lamed Hey. That's what he asked the question. But he answers that in the end of the day, the connection which is accomplished through doing that mitzvah, that one mitzvah, is enormous. Is something which is we cannot describe or value the idea of doing a mitzvah, and accordingly learning any piece of Torah. And when we'll understand the virtue of connecting to Hashem through that mitzvah, we can understand that it's all worth it to go through the whole system and not necessarily change on a core level, as long as we can connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And that's basically from Lamed Hey and on. Even though before that, Al Rebbe explains basically from Yud Ches till Chavav, also what's Torah and what the package of Torah mitzvahs and why it's so important, etc. I mean, it's important, we know because Hashem gave it, but what's behind it and what we can perceive the importance and significance of Torah mitzvahs. But the type of question that Al Rebbe asks and answers accordingly is in the beginning of Lamed Hey. He says, Lama Ha'isa Kazai. He says, what's the point? To take someone and put him in and tell them all your life you're not going to really change on the core level? But then Al Rebbe continues again to bring out the great virtue of that one mitzvah, because that mitzvah in the end of the day is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, and through the mitzvah we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a one absolute, for the time at least when we do the mitzvah, even though before we don't change, but the time we do the mitzvah we are 100% connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we can never connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in any place, realm or world, including Gan Eden for that matter, to Hashem like as much as when we do the mitzvah. Based on the Mishnah, that one moment in this world with Tshuva, Ma'asim Tevim, Mikol Chayil Maba. Mikol Chayil Maba means to say the entire world to come, including when Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting at this time, because that is only a ray of the Shechina, Ziv HaShechina. The essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in that Peret Tefillin, in that Shabbos candle, or maybe in that sukkah or in that little Esrog, and that connection on this with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is precisely in the mitzvah and nowhere else we can do, only in this world. And therefore, despite in our personality, in other words, our spiritual level in Avodas Hashem, on the core level, not necessarily do we make a real dent in Nefesh Bahamis. Again, I would just say parenthetic, till Hashem decides. Because remember, being a tzaddik and not a tzaddik is when Hashem decides that you're going to be a tzaddik. Maybe Hashem could see somebody's 15 years struggling with Beinin, being a Beinin, and he decides to remove a little to help him make the dent in his Beinin, in his Nefesh Bahamis, and then he starts getting, what's the feeling like, basically. Based on this understanding, this build-up, he's just simply starts becoming more excited about God and godliness, and less excited of anything which is naturally worldly or animalistic. That's the experience, probably, right? But that's when the Eibishter decides. That's why it's called Avodas Matana at Tenis Kenachim. It's a present based on a pasuk. That the idea of a tzaddik is a present from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's simcha tzaddikim b'Hashem. They're more b'simcha with true b'simcha. Right? Not talking about anything chitzoniyut, external, like someone, he announces to everybody he's excited about God inside and outside. We're talking about a tzaddik is naturally excited about God, because that's the definition of a tzaddik. That he's a step higher. His nefesh bahamis, his inclination to worldly matters and taivas are minimized or starting to diminish, and again that dent of the nefesh bahamis, nefesh likis, continues to flourish. Hence, he's excited about God. But that's when Hashem decides that he's going to become a bit of a tzaddik, or a greater tzaddik. There's thousands of levels tzaddikim, as we learn. He said tens of thousands of levels, based on how much it's been diminished, right? But the Beinani, he could be a Beinani kol yomov. If Hashem decides he's not going to be a tzaddik, he could be a Beinani for 10 decades. So what's it all about? It could be very discouraging, like you said. At the end of the day, the mitzvah, that little mitzvah, because we're in this world, with the Nefesh Bahamis, with our connection to this reality via Nefesh Bahamis, and that's the only place we can do Torah mitzvahs. Not where the soul is divested from body, but the soul is invested in body, with an animal soul in this physical world, but that's the only way it could put on tefillin. It could be in tune to the physical pair of tefillin, number one, and then it could actually put on the tefillin. It has a hand, and has a healthy hand, and so on. It has a healthy mind to learn Torah, and the connection of Kosh Baruch Hu via Torah mitzvahs. It's all worth it, and that was the point of Dira Batachteinim, making a dwelling place for Kosh Baruch Hu Batachteinim, precisely where the Nefesh Bahamis is, where the person who is not changed. That's where he connects in the most absolute levels of Kosh Baruch Hu. So that's basically the answer. The Rabbi gives the answer to that question. And he begins Lamed Hey is yes. It's a question. And he brings the Zohar, the famous Yenuka, which was a little child which had great revelations. He was a young child, and he bases this whole extra. I say extra because in the very beginning also, the Rebbe explains is what's the virtue of a mitzvah. What is a mitzvah? Why is it so special, a mitzvah? What does it mean one moment in this world more than all the experiences in the world to come? Isn't that all a spiritual world? Is all a physical world? So there's a few places in Tanya that expresses the virtue of Torah mitzvahs. Basically, Tanya, one of the main important points of the part of the Tanya, but that question and answer, you find Lamed Hey starts again a new stretch of the mile of mitzvahs and Torah, which doesn't exist even in the neshama, and in the neshama divested from a body, as an example. So that's basically the answer. If I could just push through a few lines, I'd like to keep it to the time, but if you could just push it a few lines, it's already 9:01 or 2, but no, it's actually 3. So if we could just push through again to follow the flow over here. Now I will. So Einim Mislapshim here. So Mashavat Ibn Ma'aseh Nefesh Einim Mislapshim Mechva Peva Yadayim Sharei Bareguf. At that time when he learns Torah, the nefesh, the animal soul, is not invested in thought, and his mouth means his speech, or hands, and the other limbs of the body. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means that dominance of the nefesh alikis of the godly soul, shenos and shlita memshala l'mayach alalev, which give the dominance and governing force or rulership of mind over heart to completely invest in Torah. At that moment when he learns Torah, the godly soul, which is in the Mayach, as remember that's the premier station of the godly soul, is dominant in the small city, which again they'll use the small city, which is the person, which is the limbs of the body. Kulam, all of them. That the body at that time when a person learns Torah is a garment in a chariot to its 3 garments, the 3 garments of the godly soul. When we say chariot, means just like a chariot doesn't have anything on its any desire in its own, it just follows or is just there as a vehicle that the rider rides in that chariot. That's the term of a chariot, similar to a garment. Where the person goes, that's where his garment goes, right? So the same thing when he learns Torah, it becomes his whole body, his whole mitzias at that time, because again all his investment of learning Torah become a garment in a chariot, not to the 3 garments of the animal soul, which are completely set aside at that time, but naturally to the shleish levusheha, to the 3 garments of the godly soul, which invest in them, which are the thought, speech, and action of the 630 mitzvahs of Torah. In this case, he deals with someone who's learning Torah, but again, obviously, it refers to the all-encompassing Shemer Torah mitzvahs, which is learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Aval Mahusa Batzmusa Shenef Shalikis, the core essence of the godly soul, Ein Lo Shlitu Memshala Mahusa Batzmusa Shenef Shabahamis V'Beinani, does not have a dominance over the core essence of the animal soul by Beinani, only when, and here the Alter Rebbe alludes to what you brought up, okay, only the time when the love of Kodesh Baruch Hu is manifest, is revealed, only in special times, in the time of davening. That's a bonus at that time, because the whole experience of davening is a love experience of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you can't love 2 things which are antithetical one to each other. So the time of davening remains by definition a bonus. That I can experience a love means to say that my godly soul on its core level is dominant over the animal soul on its core level, because that's the definition of davening. But that's a bonus. And he says, even then, as we said, ain't it actually to Memshal Levad? It's not a complete dominance, because we know after davening, the fact that you see that after davening, things get back to normal, let's call it. I don't know what's the normal, but let things come back to regular. That shows, even retroactively, it wasn't a complete dominance, but a bonus it was. We'll stop over here. If I may just say orally, that what Alter Rebbe adds over here, and it's important to know because you brought it up over here, that there's certain people, when they learn Torah, they learn Torah a little bit like they daven also. What does it mean? That they're not only learning Torah for the intellectual pursuit. They have a taiva to learn Torah, and they have a taiva not only to the scholarship in Torah, or the intellect, to the connect to the Eibush, but also on an emotional level. Connect to the Eibush, we connect also when we put on tefillin. But when you get involved in learning Torah, it could be connection to a Kodesh Baruch Hu on an emotional level. So the Rebbe says that that's similar to like the dimension of davening could be within Torah as well. And he brings this the famous Rabbi, which didn't stop learning Torah ever. He didn't stop learning Torah. The Rebbe is b'chasheka b'chafetza, with a yearning, desiring heart to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via the information he was learning. So it was a very similar kind of davening moments within learning Torah by these great Tanaim, Ameroim, and it could be by other people also. But in the end of the day, that could be looked like as a bonus, or also be classified like a bonus, like the time of davening. But what Alter Rebbe is saying in the very end of the day is that what if he stops learning and he pulls back, it could get back to normal, similar to the Beit, and he finishes davening. Right. And that's a demonstration that it doesn't mean that he's not a Beit. With it, Alter Rebbe is going to answer, we're going to see how did the Rabbi said Kigaina no Beinani, the first page of Tanya, he said, like, I'm a Beinani. Rabbi was the Tzaddik and Gadol Hadayt at that time. And it says there was two people in history with the Malach HaMavis had a problem with. David HaMelech and Rabbi. This is, we know anyway. The Rabbi did not stop learning Torah. The Malach HaMavis, which doesn't have the right to take a person who's learning Torah, he had a problem with Rabbi. That's how much Rabbi was. So even the most difficult mitzvah to complete, which is learning Torah, even Rabbi kept in. He was the one said, Kigaina no Beinani, like I'm a Beinani, and he wasn't lying to himself. Right? Humbleness doesn't mean you lie to yourself. The answer is because he felt that because he learns Torah, it's never a demonstration that he really transformed his core. He really did. As the Abai said, you're really a tzaddik. But in his mind he said, even I learned 24 hours, like somebody davening 24 hours a day. So he got involved in this bonus, but in the end, because it's a bonus, and it can be a bonus, it doesn't mean that I'm a tzaddik. That's why he said he's a beinani.
But
again, we'll get.
He did it as a protection.
But he was basically saying that I'm learning Torah. He didn't say those words, but he knew he was learning Torah. He wasn't lying to himself. He learning Torah, he knew he's involved in mitzvahs, but what he was saying is, what Alter Rebbe is basically saying over here, because, not necessarily because you're involved in learning Torah 24 hours a day, doesn't mean that you changed on a core level. If you didn't change a core level, I'm not a tzaddik, I'm just a beinani. That's why he said he's a beinani. Anyways, have a great evening. The rest of you look forward to continue.